Is AI really as scary as we think it is? So first of all, I apologize for the attire, it's hot as balls outside. Plus, if you see any spots, I've just waxed my chest. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's actually talk about today's topic. AI. For the uninformed, AI is artificial intelligence, which is basically trying to think of a computer with a mind. Consider Terminator, for example. However, the difference now is that AI really exists, like we're actually training it to be what we want it to be. And understandably, a lot of people are really scared of it. But I've come to terms with it now. But then again, I am a Zoomer, so there's some bias. I do think we're blowing it out of proportion to some extent, but I don't think that's exactly unwarranted. So today, I'm going to go over why I think it's not as huge a deal and why we just need to accept that we need to adapt with it. So let's begin with point number one. AI is taking our jobs. This is a pretty common thing I've seen get talked about recently, especially online, that people's jobs, whether it be in retail, in job security, in whatever else that requires technology, that they're going to get replaced by it. But after watching this particular clip from Pirate Software, hats off to him by the way.
Let's say that IA in the future takes your job away, and you didn't plan for this. You didn't learn anything. Well, then the outcome is that nothing happens, but you're exactly the same. Let's say that the AI in the future takes your job away, but you learned a bunch of stuff. Well, the outcome in the future is that you can adapt to the situation, it's fine. So don't worry about AI, it doesn't matter. Let's say that AI in the future doesn't take your job away, but you decided not to learn anything because AI may take your job. Well, the outcome is that you didn't learn anything and AI is not there to stop. So, you get nothing. Let's say AI doesn't take your job in the future and you learn a bunch of shit. Guess what? You still win. So the only option in this equation is learning shit. Because if you learn shit, you always win. And if you don't learn shit, you always lose. So the AI is irrelevant. Invest in yourself. Don't worry about it.
Thank you, Thor. I had a little bit of an epiphany after watching that. Are we more scared of losing the job or the title of the job? Let me break it down this way. How many people do you think want to be a bard nowadays? Whatever you just said is probably wrong, because now we call them producers and musical artists. Similarly, how often do you see carriage drivers, like horse-drawn carriage drivers? Not many, even though they are still a thing, but now we just predominantly call them taxi drivers. At the end of the day, it is more perspective than just XYZ job. So let's bring up a pretty recent example with Kwebbelkop. Even though SunnyV2 said that Kwebbelkop was quite a prevalent YouTuber back in the day, I'd only heard of him through that video. But we're not here to talk about that today. Rather, that Kwebbelkop wants to turn his whole channel AI, just so we can basically create a content farm. I think in that scenario that can't be defended because with gaming content especially, like what he did, you do need more genuine reactions. But then again, we are still in the infancy of AI, so I can't really speak for that right now. Who knows? AI might get really good for reactions then. Something a bit more practical, especially on my end, was the downfall of the power station in Rugeley. I think it's been shut down since 2014, just after I left high school. A lot of people, talking in the hundreds, lost their jobs because of losing the power plants. So what's that got to do with AI, you ask? Well, it's all about learning different skills, like Pirate Software just said. If you adapt to oncoming culture, you are going to find jobs more easily, rather than just settle with what you know. And granted, a lot of people who worked in the power station were probably up in their 50s, 60s. They wouldn't have needed or wanted to learn about sustainable energy environments, with wind farms or whatever the water-based one was. Future Gabriel, put that up on the screen there. Yeah, that one. I think the easiest way to combat AI taking over your job is to follow it. Jobs don't necessarily disappear. Rather, it adapts with the current culture. So if you're a chef, for example, and your job is probably going to be taken over by robots, given how quickly we need to prepare food and whatever, you could most likely write and train an AI for different recipes and like different preparation methods. That's not even just existing jobs that could be altered in the future. There probably will be a new job market for AI maintenance or model trainers, which I think will be a big market in the coming years, probably in the next 5, I'd say. Intuition is kind of lacking there. Point number 2. AI is going to replace artists and especially musicians. I think this one's kind of bullshit, because at the end of the day, there's no such thing as real art or music. It's whatever you perceive it to be. I don't know, you could easily say that with images like this that my friend sent to me. Going by this example especially, this probably comes from an older model like Stable Diffusion. You will see things with multiple limbs or anomalies right in the back there. But give it time. Like, there's a lot of programs and sites out there that do actually make really good art. If you want a recommendation, go for Ideogram. What I mean by the generational gap is that you can't call yourself a producer if you don't make your own songs from scratch, like you don't use any samples or whatever. Similarly, with real art, you can't call yourself an artist if you don't paint. At least in the sense of using actual paint and paintbrush. Again, I do think that's kind of bullshit. If you know how to draw at least, you probably could call yourself an artist. I mean, I draw. And I will begrudgingly give some examples here. Terrible, I know. And I know there is the really big issue of people taking other people's art, even if they're not super well known to their own communities, and then using them as a template to do their own AI-generated art. I think there will come a point where that will become illegal, or there will be regulations in place to protect that. But I think at the same time, like, I don't think that's a huge deal. I think the best course of action here would to have jobs specifically made for making art to train AI models. For example, you could probably draw certain things like animals to train a specific model that specializes with animals. And on the music side of things, there's a lot of sample-based sites out there, namely Splice and Sample Focus, which I use personally. That's not even just making samples, it could be whole beats or songs that could easily be remixed by AI and make it sound so much better, or give you a new idea so that you're not just locked in to what you perceive it to be. I think there's a good chance that in the future there'll be jobs out there for people to make samples for AI generated music as well as using their own voices, which I know is a pretty big thing now and a little bit dangerous, but we'll get onto that soon. Point number 3, and probably the most controversial one, AI is going to take away real people from relationships. I say that because we have sites such as Character AI, and whatever else there is, that let people talk to people that don't really exist. That's not even necessarily just chatbots, it's actual learning AI. Like, they will go back to what you said to them and look through their character descriptions or whatever they have and tailor it to keep it consistent. Not like Eevee. There is a big worry about that, and it's totally understandable. But you have to remember, like, there are a lot of people out there who would actively, kidnap and try and make XYZ person how they perceive them to be. Like, a person who would kidnap their crush to try and make them fall in love with them. For example, Roger from American Dad. I know that's a really extreme example, but there are people who would do that without hesitation. But here's the thing. You can train an AI and keep it ethical to a point. You can't do that to a person unless you're a master of social engineering. I'm not saying that makes it okay, though. So the point that I'm trying to say is like, it would keep those people away, at least for a time, to fulfill their dark fantasies. And they could just leave it at that. It probably is just a fleeting thought that they could never act upon unless they just snap and just commit it. And the last and most prevalent thing that I see is AI is so much easier to commit crimes. The best example I can give here is Dazondarian framing his principle for being a racist by using an AI-generated voice. It is absolutely scary at first, but may I present Home Alone 2.
Howdy do. This is Peter McAllister, the father.
I'd like a hotel room, please,
Yes.
with an extra large bed, a TV, and one of those little refrigerators you have to open with a key.
Yes, sir. You'll need a major credit card upon check-in.
Credit card?
You got it.
Thank you.
Kevin, you
Enjoy your
bastard.
stay.
It's not even just with the voices, it's using AI to generate scenarios with especially celebrities that haven't done such things, namely this Taylor Swift photo. I find it funny that people act like this is a new thing, but did we just forget about deepfakes using Photoshop? Or, like a show with a Home Alone clip, people just chopping up audio? I know they're primitive now, but people back then believed that those were real. I know not so much with the Home Alone thing, but people could do that. I know with AI it's so much easier to do, but I think there should be a law to regulate whose voices you can use. Or not even just with who you can use, they probably will have to develop a technology to sort of safeguard those voices and see if those are AI generated to see if it is a forgery. It may sound kind of weird to say that now, but with how fast AI is evolving, I don't think that's out of the question at all. This video has just been shitting on AI right now, so let's go over some good things that it could do, or is doing right now. A really good example is using something like ChatGPT to expand upon ideas that you've had for, for games, for TV show ideas, for movies. Like, you could just have very vague ideas, because Lord knows I have, and you could easily use something with that sort of a feature to help you expand upon it, namely their personality traits, their likes and dislikes, their whatever the fuck, doesn't matter. But that's really good creatively, rather than just have it write it for you. And it's not even just down to creative stuff, like I've mentioned millions of times in this video already. It could be used to help with cybersecurity. Like, it could compile a database that could detect all kinds of viruses in one hub, rather than having to use so many, for example, any VPNs or security networks. And going back to the images and voices thing, we could develop a model that could sharpen images to detect faces and full bodies for criminals, and even go down to hell, even the height and weight just based on an image. And that's especially if those images are very low quality, namely from a basic security camera system. I know we already have GPS, but we could also use AI to further expand upon like what's in the area, namely like what minerals are there, or how far down the Earth is to the nearest whatever the fuck, to the nearest power wire or whatever. Now that both sides of the argument have been made, I have some points that I would like to bring up and see if they would come into law or come into regular practice for AI. For examples with TV and movie series, I should think that AI could only be used to upscale or sort of correct things in scenes, namely if a bird flies in the background that's not supposed to be there, or someone who's walking in the background that's not supposed to be in the shots. They could use that to crop them out or upscale the image just to make it look better. If they do have to use AI to generate a full scene, I do think they should limit that to at least 10 seconds at most, just as a spitball. Like I said before with the art thing, I do think there should be a law that would consent for artists, whether or not they are making art for AI, whether they want their images to be remixed, should they want to. Because I know there's a good few images where it is like the perfect angle or the perfect pose, but because of how everything is right now, it is kind of unethical to steal their art and remix it. It's just as bad as tracing, really. Or at least some would think that. And more for commercial use, like for how we would. It should be restricted to no celebrities or well-known persons to be generated in their likeness. Because like I said with the Taylor Swift thing, people would easily believe that. I know you can't exactly police everyone's face on there, but there will come a point where that might be a necessary evil. This is certainly just one man's take on AI, especially with how it's evolving as of 2024, because Lord knows how it's going to be in the next year. I do think we need to be more lenient with it and not so much give in, but accept that it's here and that we do need to prepare for it and learn as much as we can about it so we can remain a society that can work. There's easily a lot of points I probably have skipped over right now, so if there is anything you'd like me to add for a future video, just leave it down in the comments, or whatever side it is by the next YouTube update. Just leave it in the comments and I'll probably compile that into another video. In all seriousness though, just leave your points in the comments and I'll consider them for a future video. So this has been Bronus Newman. I shall see you later.